Hello, my name is Samantha Massaro, and I have decided to do the Child Protection Law or the Michigan Child Protection Law. So, just a little overview. So, the Michigan Child Protection Law, or otherwise known as Act 238, um, was put into place to help protect children who are being subjected to abuse and neglect. So, this law includes requiring certain professionals to report child abuse and neglect or suspicions of these acts. And it also allows for anybody and all people to report child abuse and neglect or their suspicions of this act. And it also provides protection for the child who is being abused and neglected. So a little bit on ideology. So the Michigan Child Protection Law has a few different political ideologies. So it falls under the political ideology of social conservatism for a part of it. And it falls under the part that states that individuals are capable of creating chaos and doing evil things, and that society must be protected by restricting these evil impulses. And also, it falls under the category in the way that the government should be should control socially undesirable behaviors, such as the child abuse and neglect. It also falls under the ideology of pragmatic liberalism, under the belief that social welfare is part of the government's function to protect its citizen from harm, so protecting the children from this abuse, which this law does provide. Um, so a little bit on politics. So this law is a public law, and it is the very first child protection law, which was CAPTA, was signed by President Nixon, who was a Republican. There has been no rejection or argument on this law, basically between either the parties, Republican or Democrat, um, because when it comes to child protection that this law provides, they're all in agreement. Yeah. A little bit on the economics. So the act of child abuse and neglect holds an economic toll on not just only the individual child and their families, but also on the community, the state, and the country. So just on like the individual side and the family side, um, about 43% of um, Saginaw County itself, um, about 43% of the households are living in poverty. And that being said, the cost of living is going up. So it makes it that makes it harder for an individual to leave the household or a family to leave the household and start anew without the abuser. Um, because it's just so expensive and sometimes it's just not affordable. Also, sometimes the families can be relying on the abuser's income to stay afloat and to make a living. So that's also another possibility of why they don't just leave. Um, Other costs would include like medical care, hospital stays, foster care costs if the child is removed from the home. Um, and then a couple other ones, more on the individual, would be like lower academic achievement, more possible criminality as the child gets older, and a possible lifelong mental illnesses. So yeah, and then a little bit on history. So the child protection laws have been around for many years. Each state has their own child protection law, and so here's a little fact. Animals had protective rights before children did. And the idea or the concept of child protection wasn't even brought up or even thought of until 1874, and it was brought up by, it was thought of because of a abuse case of a child named Mary Ellen Wilson that happened in New York City. So in 1875, the idea for child protection laws was brought up at the New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty of Children, their annual conference. And by the year 1922, about 300 organizations had laws or policies put into place that helped prevent child abuse and neglect. And so in 1974, Congress put into place the first federal legislation that addressed child abuse and neglect, which was CAPTA. And in exchange for federal funding for abuse prevention and treatment, CAPTA required every state to establish child abuse reporting procedures. Hence the reason Michigan has its very own child protection law that was established in 1975. A social movement that is revolved around protection of children is the National Call to Action. It is a social movement that wants to end child abuse and neglect, and this movement fights to end it by going through public and private organizations and raising awareness and raising the level of urgency that is needed to protect children. So in relation to Saginaw, there are many different ways that this law is embedded in our very own community. Many organizations, businesses, public health associations, and much more in Saginaw must follow this law because many of the professionals that work in these organizations and businesses are required under the law to report child abuse or neglect. So these professions include doctors, nurses, teachers, anything to do with law enforcement, whether it's lawyers, police, fire department, social workers, and many other professions. So an organization in our very own community is a CAN Council. It is an organization that their mission is to build communities where children are safe from abuse and neglect, and they are doing a lot of fantastic work in our very own community. And yeah, so if you have any questions, please reach out to me, and I hope you enjoyed.